Good morning. My name is Jana Mino, and I am on the STEM team at the Ohio Department of Education. In just a moment, you're going to meet someone whose experiences, wisdom, and passion are going to stay with you for a long, long time. And hopefully, they're going to move you to want to join the work to make STEM more accessible and inclusive for people with disabilities. Dr. Yujia Ding is a STEM educator and disability advocate with a passion for sharing her love of biology with students. She has an invisible illness that has no known cure and has learned to live with the fear of her body giving out at a moment's notice. That's why she's going to be joined on the stage by Griffey, a service animal that has enabled her to navigate her STEM studies and career. She'll tell you more in just a moment, but first, the STEM Learning Ecosystems Community of Practice, with support from Ohio's 5 ecosystems, are joining us at the Department of Education in the Smithsonian's Zero Barriers in STEM initiative. We'll be sharing more about this in the coming weeks. For now, please join me in welcoming someone I am proud to call my friend, Dr. Yujia Ding.
Perfection is boring. That's what a dear friend of mine once told me. She said I was one of the brightest people she knew. I could talk about Western blot's size exclusion chromatography with multi-angle light scattering and polyacrylamide gels for days. Yet I didn't and couldn't believe I was intelligent. I have always stood out in one way or another, and I have yearned to just blend in. When I went home to Beijing in the summers, I was a head taller and 3 shades darker than everyone around me. I was very tan as a child. On the softball field, I often was the only Asian amongst my peers. I was the first Asian softball player my varsity coach had coached on varsity in over a decade of leading the team. It was not until nearly a decade and a half later would I realize that what made me stand out and made me different would be one of my greatest strengths. Growing up, I tried to hide my accent. I tried to hide my ignorance to the changing world around me by burying myself in my studies. I focused on being perfect, being invisible, and doing whatever I could to not cause any trouble at all. For the most part, I did just that. I followed the traditional path we all seem to have been told about when we were in high school. Graduate, go to university for your bachelor's degree, and in my case, go on to become a doctor or an engineer. My 17-year-old brain understood that to mean more school. Life had other plans, though. I veered off the traditional path rather quickly, transferring from UCLA after my sophomore year to Northwestern University. I then applied to medical school and PhD programs, ultimately choosing the PhD program because that was my only option. I wasn't accepted into medical school and had no one to ask for advice or to talk through my options. Rather than complete my PhD in molecular biosciences, I mastered out after my qualification exam. I mastered out after my qualification exam and began to search for work in biotechnology because, again, I thought that was all I could do. I didn't have anyone to look up to, nor did I know you could teach in high school with a master's in science. Even admitting I mastered out of my PhD program felt taboo for the longest time. Life continued to throw curveballs at me. My health began to decline, and I moved across the country with my 2 dogs to try and start over. I ended up in school again after a brief hiatus, and I thought I found my passion, teaching. As I slowly worked my way through my teaching credential and my Master's of Arts in Education program, I experienced the challenges of navigating life with an invisible and chronic health condition. Once I had my own classroom, though, I saw how my students with disabilities had been forgotten and seen almost as an afterthought. In my first biology class, where I was the teacher of record, one student who had never passed a science class because he was ashamed to use his accommodations and wanted to hide his disability had passed with a B. It wasn't until I began to embrace my own health struggles and not try to hide my 70-pound service dog did I truly understand what it meant that perfection is boring. I set off to better understand what I could do as a scientist, an educator, and an individual with disabilities to change the narrative that I saw time and time again with my students and myself. I started on yet another degree, and I promise it's my last one for now, and made it my mission to break down barriers and be my own role model. The ignorance I had when growing up is now something I embrace. I have always turned in my homework, never once missing an assignment, until now. My mentor and assistant principal assigned me some homework months ago, and I have failed to complete it. Why? My homework has been to watch an old sitcom, Friends, that's the only one I know, to watch a laundry list of movies and some current TV series. I haven't done any of that because I don't have a TV, I don't have streaming services, and I tell myself I don't have time. To be fair, I choose not to. When my colleagues and friends make references to pop culture or classic movies and shows, I get this blank stare and immediately change the conversation. It's a deterrence tactic because the truth is, I haven't seen it. I prefer to spend my time creating lecture slides and content for my classes, editing APA 7 formatted dissertations, outside in nature, or my favorite, watching softball. Even my little dog at home knows I watch too much softball. She lays on the iPad when I'm watching yet another game. I hid my lack of pop culture knowledge for a long time. As someone who is relatively young, you would think I'd be up to date on all the latest and the greatest. You'd think I'd know the latest social media trend or keep up with whatever the latest gossip is, but I'm quite the opposite. I like to say I was born in the wrong decade because I'm quite an old soul. That makes me different and unique, and that's okay. I'm learning to embrace that my passion for softball is unlike any other. I'm learning that I connect with parents and young children with a range of disabilities in ways that others cannot. What used to be something I feared, being different, has become my greatest strength. I'm creating my own role model, one that I hope others look to and see that anything is possible. The biggest fear I had of being different has now become the greatest gift. The ability to share my own voice and hear those of others around me. Making STEM accessible may have been the topic of my dissertation that helped me earn my doctorate of education, but my hope is to live in a future society where differences are embraced and welcomed, not shunned and cast as an afterthought. It is my belief that problem solving is only as productive and effective as the perspectives at the table. Differences allow others to see the world from an alternate viewpoint through a different lens. As a scientist, I look at the data. In the United States, there are approximately 61 million adults that identify as having a disability. The biggest question I had when I started diving into the research for my dissertation was, why aren't we seen? If roughly 1 in 4 adults have a disability, shouldn't that number be roughly similar across all disciplines and careers? The research shows that approximately 28% of all students pursue a career in STEM, regardless of their disability status. Yet only 8 to 10% of individuals with disabilities are represented in STEM graduate education and employment. Why? A diagnosis is not a reason to excuse someone from the task at hand. Telling a young child with a disability they will never be a scientist because of the 10,001 challenges they will face dissuades them from even trying. Disability doesn't discriminate. Why can't we change the narrative and start at the beginning, giving every child, every student, regardless of their ability or disability, a chance to explore what is most curious to them? Instead of saying no, why don't we say yes? Let's figure out how. We are excited to share that TIES will be working with us and the Zero Barriers team to elevate the understanding and awareness of these critical issues and assisting with the creation of a community of practice group to dive more deeply and share more widely. Thank you.